Hello, everyone. This is Jamie Flinchball. Welcome to the People Solve Problems podcast. And today we have as a guest Dr. Melisa Buie. Melissa, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Jamie.
Yeah, very, very glad to have you. We're going to have some interesting topic today. So just a little introduction. Dr. Buie has a PhD in nuclear engineering and plasma physics from the University of Michigan. Go Blue. Spent 15 years at Coherent building high-powered laser systems, led operations, manufacturing transformations for semiconductor, like Lam and Applied Materials, Advanced Energy. And she's written a couple of books. We're going to talk about a more recent one, but first she wrote Problem Solving for New Engineers, which is fantastic because I think it's always interesting, as a new engineer, it's like, I know how to solve problems. Well, you know how to do your homework. That's how you know what you know how to do. And then very recently, co-authored Faceplant, Free Yourself from Failure's Funk. We're kind of going to get into that book a bit today, which is going to be fun. Great title. We'll come back to the title. But I really want to start with, giving us an example of a really difficult problem you had to solve in your past experience, which is very rich with all sorts of technical stuff and people stuff. But give us a difficult problem you had to solve, and we'll take it from there.
Okay. Well, Jamie, I'm going to give you one from a very, very recent one. It's actually related to Faceplant, my new book. And one of the things that a couple years ago, one of the things I realized is that when I'm in the lab, when I'm working on a problem in any type of technical problem, I am perfectly comfortable failing. Like it's okay. I Because what happens is I'm working on building a model and I put all that information into a model, spend time analyzing the model, figuring out what's going on, and then I know what to do next. But I realized that in my personal life, it was not that way. I was afraid to fail. And the first time I took a class at Stanford in the evenings on learning Spanish, and the first time I tried saying a word in Spanish or speaking a sentence to a friend, she burst out laughing. And I was like, that's it. I'm done. No more. And I'm not going to, I had a really fixed mindset about failing in that particular case. And so, and I could name other examples like that. And it was when I started looking at this idea of failure in other areas of my life, I'm like, I've got to figure this out. This is this is really bugging me. And so I spent a few years reading everything I could get my hands on related to failure and what failure meant and how I could overcome it and how we learn and how we grow. And that was the big problem. And it turned out that it became Faceplant. It was the birth of Faceplant. And I feel like it's been such a blessing to put together a framework that I can use to understand what's going on when I face those types of challenges.
Mm-hmm. That's great story, and I want to kind of unclick that or double click into your background because you PhD from Michigan, you did in plasma physics, and you did laser research. Most people only know enough of what they saw in the Big Bang Theory to even repeat those words. Do you think the depth of your expertise in your field makes that transition harder, or is that from experiencing failure and embracing it versus resisting it, or is it sort of a universal human condition?
I would say it's part of both. I think for me personally, it was, um, I've always thought of myself as, pretty smart. Like I could, I can handle most things. And for me to look not smart really hurt my ego.
Mm.
And so I think I took that really, really hard and then just like, nope, that's it. Here's my data point that didn't work. So I'm moving on from there. I'm going to stick with what I can do.
Yep, I like that. So the metaphor of the face plant, it's a very physical, very sort of provocative and you know uh, metaphor for what you're talking about. What inspired the use of the face plant metaphor?
Well, it actually came from my co-author, Keely Hurley, who is she's very funny and also um has these very creative ideas. And for her, she would just laugh at her failures and faux pas. And for her, it was just every story was like this, hilarious anecdote. And it was like just repeated face plants. So she came up with the name and we loved it automatically.
Yeah, that's always nice. It never happened with me where a title just sort of, once you see it, you can't look past it. So that's great that it's worked for you. Now, the subtitle of your book, "Free Yourself from Failure's Funk," the word "free" is actually an acronym for a framework, and listeners will know I love frameworks. They become just ways to organize our thinking and our help us process through whatever we're trying to do. So maybe give us a little bit about that word "free" and how that framework, what that framework is meant to do.
So I liked the acronym FREE because it really was a way to, once we're on the other side of failure and we're comfortable, we're free to fail, then there is so much freedom to just be yourself. So the framework stands for, it's an acronym that stands for focus, reflect, explore, engage. And the first step is focus. So really getting clear about what the failure is, which is a really important first step. Because if we a lot of times when things happen, we collapse a lot of story around it.
Hmm.
And you want to, in order to really like get to the other side of where freedom exists, we need to really be clear about what the facts are around the failure. Once we're clear what the facts are, then it's important. The next important step is really to reflect on that failure, reflect on those facts. Maybe what you learn is that it was just bad luck. It was bad. It was a bad time. It was a bad situation. It was the wrong people, whatever. Maybe you didn't study enough for that test,
Hmm.
or maybe your car broke down because, the service light had been on for 3 months and you kept ignoring it, right?
Hmm.
So there's something there that, and if there is, you want to get really flat about your role in that failure.
Yep.
And then on the other side of that is starting to explore. That's where you get curious. Well, what else could I have done? What what else is there to do? What what might I do in that situation next time, right? And once you've gone through several phases of that exploration and that just being really curious about what's going on, what your options might be, the next step is really to engage in some type of experimentation. So small experiments so that you can really like begin to explore the world in a whole new way.
Mhm.
And we debated about whether to call it experiment or explore. And I didn't want people to feel like, oh, that's too scientific for me or whatever. And it's really just like exploring the world in with these, all of these fresh options in mind.
Right.
And then you just repeat it over and over and over.
Yep. Oh, I like that. And again, it's simple enough. You can carry it with you and understand how it's supposed to work for you, how you're supposed to process through it instead of getting stuck or letting the open-ended narrative take the day, so to speak. Um, so was this as this framework was developed, did you compile a bunch of research around what worked and distill it down to the framework? Did you sort of experiment with a bunch of different steps and see how they worked, or were you just really reflecting on your collective experience of what did work and sort of put it together into a framework? How did the framework itself come about?
I don't think there was a linear path to it evolving. So it was a combination of, first of all, we're lean people. And so we started with Hansei, and that was kind of the guiding principle behind this, right? It was first self-reflection and then self-improvement. And you'll notice that the first two steps are very much focused on self-reflection, and the final two are really focused on self-improvement.
Mm-hmm.
And and it worked out that way. But it was very much an exercise of Hansei in our personal lives. And it turns out that this was roughly the process that we followed in our own personal exploration, and then began to work with other people on as we were developing the material. So we started by looking at our own stories. We did collect data from other people. We collected their stories. We didn't use many of the stories from other people because we wanted to really we could spend more time looking at ourselves and share those much more comfortably
Mm-hmm.
than other people's stories. So yeah, that was the process. It was very much out of our lean backgrounds. You'll notice that it has very much of a PDSA feel to it. And that's really what we wanted to focus on is um, keeping true to our lean roots.
Yep. No, I think those foundational principles, right, just get as you apply them to different situations, they morph into what's most useful in those circumstances. But a lot of the foundational things remain the same, sort of first principle style,
Right.
from that standpoint. So it's one thing for an individual to go through this and kind of face that failure and learn and self-improve. Well, we bring it inside an organization. What do you see as some of the more systematic barriers to organizations doing this on a regular basis, embracing that failure, learning from it, improving from it?
I I think one of the biggest challenges that has been highlighted fairly recently is this when organizations for them to be have this kind of psychological safety.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the work from Amy Edmondson and from the lean community, Mark Rabin has really been championing this a lot with his work. And the two of them have really been talking to a lot of leaders and a lot of organizations about how to create those environments so that people do feel safe. And it turns out that we inadvertently, like we do things unintentionally that stop people from feeling comfortable with failure, and we stop people from taking chances and from being curious with some of the behaviors that we have. And so we need to really pay attention in our organizations so that we're careful not to shut people down, and that we encourage openness and curiosity and make it safe for people to fail, and then learn from those situations. And it is not easy. It is not easy, but it is something that is so important if we really want to have a culture that's learning and growing.
Right. No, absolutely. It's not easy. And I think you kind of hinted at this in some of the word choice you made, that when leaders shut down this learning, they're not doing it intentionally most of the time. That leaders, when they say we learn from failure, they mean it. But they don't necessarily support it with their actions. Um, what do you see if you're talking to a leader who really wants to turn the corner in overt demonstration of supporting this principle? What have you seen as maybe some of the more effective things a leader can do to overtly send those signals?
So one of the questions I would ask is it easier to get a $500,000 piece of equipment in your organization, or to run a $5,000 experiment? If the answer to that is that it's easier to get the $500,000 piece of equipment than to run a simple experiment, that's one of the places I'd start looking. What system barriers exist within the organization that you really want to eliminate?
Mm-hmm.
And when people speak up in meetings, what happens? Look at the dynamics. If there's a meeting where it's supposed to be brainstorming and the whole room is silent except for one person, that's a huge, huge warning sign. Or when an idea is put out and that idea is the only idea that comes out of the meeting. So, and then everybody rallies around that one idea. Then it shows that there's some group dynamics that need to be tweaked. There's things that we can do that will help overcome that. But those are small things that you can look at areas to start really trying to change the culture.
Yep. No, I like those. Those are very, very tangible, and certainly I'll see many organizations where, yeah, you can go buy a capital equipment, but an experiment has to work, and by definition, that's not really what we mean when we say experiment and test to learn. You need to be able to spend a little, learn fast, fail fast, for it to be true experimentation.
Right. And Jamie, another thing related to that is, if this piece of equipment, the decision to buy that piece of equipment is immediate, but the decision for the experiment is, oh, I'm going to think about it, and 3 weeks later, your email hasn't even been opened, right? It shows what the priority is in the organization.
Yeah. And that's, I think, often the most important thing for us to signal is what matters more, because there's plenty of trade-offs we can always make. If there's no trade-offs, leadership would be easy, right? Um, so I like that expansion of the point. Let me kind of end with this question. It seems like you very deliberately chose the word failure, which not everybody uses, right? Sometimes, oh, it's not a failure if we've learned, or there are learning opportunities, or just mistakes or errors. And it seems very conscious that you chose to use the word failure in its strongest form possible. Um, is that just a word choice, or is there importance in actually using the word failure and then sort of pushing past it towards the learning side?
Well, I didn't want to step over something that made me uncomfortable. And failure makes us so uncomfortable. As a matter of fact, one of my friends read the book and said, I was really uncomfortable with failure, reading failure so many times. Another friend said, well, I've only failed once in my life. And I was like, oh no, I'm so sad for you, because if we aren't taking risk, if we aren't taking chances, we don't have the opportunity to learn and grow from these really rich, fertile opportunities that failure provide. And you'll hear so many people talk about, oh yes, failure is this really, it's fuel, and it's not the end of the world. It's fuel for you to really learn and grow. And there's all these positive platitudes that you hear about failure. And yet we're still so afraid to embrace it in our lives. And I really just wanted to be comfortable myself calling things what they were. And yes, in the lab, we don't call it a failure when we run an experiment and 10 experiments fail, but we're still learning things.
Right.
But I had to step back, and when I was talking with my mentor, and he's like, yes, but that DOE was beautiful. We learned so much from it. Like, yes. And none of them gave us the answer we wanted. So all 10 of them were failures, but it was a beautiful success because we did learn, and we built a model that led us in a direction that, changed the complete process for us for the future. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's very
love the
deliberate.
Yep, I love that answer. And so if the word failure makes people uncomfortable, then that means there's some ripe opportunities to learn and improve.
Yes.
Fantastic response. Dr. Melisa Buie, thank you for coming on and sharing about your new book.
Thank you for having me, Jamie.